Welcome back, YouTube, to Alex's Flying Club, and I'm going to be doing another video for Aces High. I'm in a 4-engine bomber, the Lancaster 3, and I'm just going to wait until all 4 engines are started. That was the first one you just heard. Okay, I think that was the 4th engine that started, and I'm just going to wait for the temperatures of the engines to rise before I take off. Even though in this game it does not matter, you can just hit full throttle and get going right away, but for my own reasons, just for a little bit of more realism, I like to wait for the engines to warm up sometimes in this game. And like I mentioned, this is Aces High, and this is going to be an offline mission. That's why you may have noticed the enemy planes circling around the base that the flak is shooting at and that are not shooting at me. These are offline drones, and if you have this game, I'm sure you're very familiar with the way this setup works. But the reason why I'm playing offline, even though I've done online missions in this aircraft, is because I wanted to do a night mission, and all the arenas in Aces High, the online arenas, they all take place in the daytime. And I wanted to fly the Lancaster bomber. This is a British bomber that was primarily used for night operations over Germany and German-occupied territories. So I changed the arena settings, and this is going to be, as you can see, a nighttime mission. I'm just going to take off from this field and head over to an enemy field and bomb that. Actually, I'm heading over to the enemy headquarters buildings, or their main city, and I'm going to bomb that. But kind of a fair warning early on in the video, this is going to be kind of a boring video visually, because it's taking place offline. I really have no competition here aside from anti-aircraft fire that you'll see over the target. I did record this video already, so I know what happens. I'm doing the narration after the recording. And then the other thing that is kind of bad is that my track IR doesn't really show up. My head movements don't really show up in this recording. That's kind of a drawback of Aces High, and one of the things where it falls behind its competitors is that the recording mode, the playback mode, doesn't do a good job of capturing track IR inputs. In fact, you'll just see in this video, I'll be looking straight ahead at the cockpit, which isn't what I was doing when I was actually flying this mission. So fair warning, it'll be kind of boring visually, because you're just going to be looking straight ahead, and especially because it's nighttime, you'll just pretty much see the sky, the sea, and the moon occasionally. But I thought this was an interesting mission to do anyway, because I searched on YouTube, maybe not very hard, but I did search and couldn't find any videos of night bombing missions in the Lancaster, which I thought was kind of surprising. But yeah, I decided to make this video, and the reason why I've been interested in the Lancaster bomber recently is because I was driving through Canada, and I just by coincidence drove through a small little town in Alberta called Nanton, and by coincidence found an aviation museum on my way, and I pulled in there, and as I was driving up to the museum, I think they were having like a town fair or like city festival or something, so there were a lot of people around it in a park. But I see this huge Lancaster bomber outside of a hangar, and with a few people around it, and I was just odd because I did not expect to see this, and it was really welcome surprise. So I pulled over, I came up to the bomber and actually realized that it's the Bomber Command Museum of Canada, and they were exhibiting the Lancaster. I got a chance to walk all around it, inside of it, which was really nice. It's kind of a rare thing, I guess, for these historic aircraft, and it just kind of was such a pleasant surprise for me to run into this museum and to have this great experience, and may be interested in the Lancaster bomber and in Bomber Command in general. And yeah, I mean, my impressions of the Lancaster, the cockpit. Oh, you just saw the scene transition there, and that was actually I just had taken off, and now I'm heading over the target. I kind of fast forwarded there, so you don't see all the time that it took me to climb to 18,000 feet. So yeah, before I get back into a little bit about the Lancaster at the museum, I'm on my bomb run right now. Actually, you'll hear the bomb doors open fairly soon. And again, with these views in the playback mode, there goes the bomb bay. With these views, you'll see the bomb site, but it'll look weird because the ground will be moving sideways rather than straight ahead, as I would normally have seen it when I was actually flying this mission. So again, it's just a playback thing. It's not how it was actually shown, but yeah, so don't use this video as any kind of guide on how to do bombing properly, because all the sites are messed up, but you can still see it visually. And in fact, it's kind of cool when the bombs will be released. You'll see them fly across the gun site. And this is the gun site I'm talking about. You'll see them fly across the gun site, which actually I don't see during the regular view mode when I'm flying the mission. So as I'm on my bomb run, I'll talk about the Lancaster a little bit more. So yeah, the cockpit of the Lancaster, I think, is modeled in this game very well. I think it's one of the aircraft that has had recently a kind of like a visual touch-up to the interior controls, because I think just flying some of the aircraft in Aces High, I definitely noticed that some of them just visually are lacking in their cockpit modeling. It just looks like a generic control panel superimposed over very different aircraft. Like, for instance, the SBD Dauntless looks like a very generic cockpit. I think B-26 has a really weird looking cockpit. But some of the planes that they've been working on, I know the Lancaster 3, I think, had a recent improvement. It looks really nice, and just remembering how the cockpit looked in real life when I visited the museum, and then flying this aircraft right now in Aces High, I think they did a good job. I mean, of course, you can't. This is a MMO RPG or whatever, so you can't use all the controls. It's not super realistic, but just visually, it looks pretty accurate. And walking around the Lancaster, you enter the aircraft through the nose. There's a hatch at the bottom of the kind of compartment where the bombardier would sit. And sorry, it's just a second. I have to plug in my computer. Didn't realize it was running low on power. Okay. Now my laptop has the energy that it needs. Where was I? Oh yeah, so walking through the Lancaster, it's really kind of a surprising experience for me, because I didn't realize just how awkward it is to make your way from the nose of the aircraft to the tail. And the reason is because they're it's kind of subdivided into compartments, and to get from one compartment to another, there's like a almost like a hatch. Well, there's kind of a wall that comes up halfway or like a third of the way from the floor, so it's almost like a submarine hatch. You have like a small area to walk through to get to the next compartment. And this was kind of awkward to do just in my regular street clothes, but imagining how it must have been for aviators in their full gear, flight suit, warm clothing, parachute, just making their way back and forth across this area at night, just must have been really, really uncomfortable. So yeah, this aircraft has less crew members than a B-17 or a B-24. I think it's 7 crew members, and it's lacking some of the gunners that an American heavy bomber would have. For instance, there's no ball turret gunner, and if you're playing this with this aircraft online, it's a little bit easier to shoot down than a B-17 or a B-24, because you can get below the aircraft in a fighter. You can get below the Lancaster and then zoom up to attack it from the belly. If you practice that, it's really hard for the Lancaster to defend against that. And I'm coming up on the target here. You might have seen me flying through an airfield. That wasn't my target, it was just a field on the way to the target. And that noise that you're hearing in the background is me engaging the war emergency power, which is just an extra kick on the throttle to increase the speed to what I had calibrated on the bomb site. And there you hear the flak, which will be the only real opposition to my mission in this video. Bombs away. Mission accomplished. I'm turning the Lancaster toward my base. So you actually can't see them in this playback view, but I have 2 bombers flying alongside me, one on the left, one on the right, and you have to be careful in this game to not turn too rapidly. Like with these bombers, I don't go over about a 30% bank, because or 30% roll, whatever it's called, because I will lose the drones that are flying alongside me if I turn too far. So yeah, that's why it's kind of taking me a while to get back on the heading for my home base. In a fighter, you can just zoom right to where you need to go. You don't have to worry about things like that. But I think maybe flying these bombers helps you practice coordinated turns and handling the aircraft in a gentle way and things like that. Here I'm kind of diving a little bit because I'm trying to run away from the flak guns. And once we're clear of the flak, I'm going to fast forward the video again. You'll see a scene transition to the last segment of the video where I land. Okay, so I've been descending, and I'm at about, I think, 5,500 feet, making my way toward the runway. And yeah, I mean, this kinds of these kinds of missions are really interesting. I'm kind of curious to play like a special event that takes place at night, maybe like simulated nighttime bombing raid by the RAF. So, like for FSO, maybe the Allies would have a bunch of Lancaster bombers, and maybe some fighter escort. Actually, I'm not sure how often these Lancasters were escorted by fighters at night. That's something I'll have to look into. But the Axis could play they could fly like the BF-110s or Ju-88s or even Messerschmitt 262s, and they'd be able to kind of see the bombers on radar because they would have radar sets and they'd be vectored toward the bombers from ground control personnel. So I think that would be an interesting setup. It might be a little mismatched because the bombers would have a large disadvantage, but I think it would be really cool. Just flying this mission, I think, gave me a better appreciation visually for what these missions may have been like, with the night sky and the stars being out and seeing the moon. It kind of almost looks like a space simulator rather than a flight simulator. I kind of had that sense when I was flying this mission. Now, I did notice a glitch in the game. I don't know if it's just on my system or if other people have experienced this. For some reason, the ground behind my airplane wasn't rendering properly, like the sea wasn't showing properly, and then even as I got closer to the runway, the ground wasn't rendering. I don't think the sky was either, so it would just be like blank space. And as I was making my final approach, I actually couldn't see the runway. That was another thing, and it just looked like I just saw like this brown patch on the ground where the airfield was. So I saw the runway from far away, so I kind of knew where it was, but then when I got closer it would just disappeared. So you'll see my landing looks kind of goofy because I wasn't really sure where the center line was, but in the playback right now it seems to show up just fine. Now, Bomber Command has an ambiguous legacy in aviation history because of Bomber Harris and the policies that they chose to pursue of area bombing, whereas these bombers couldn't really bomb accurately at night, and they had to fly at night because the earlier on in the war, the opposition against them during daytime was so strong with flag and fighters that they switched to nighttime operations. But then they couldn't pinpoint targets, so they started bombing just areas of heavy concentration of civilians, so like cities and industrial centers like the Ruhr, where some of the factories were embedded in residential areas and things like that. And they would actually target civilians, partly in retribution as kind of a revenge for the London Blitz of the bombings by the Germans of British population centers, but also partly the theory was that it would demoralize the enemy population and it would kind of weaken their will to fight. And there's still an ongoing controversy of how effective this strategy was and how appropriate it was, you know, morally speaking. There was a terrible loss of life because of the bombing campaigns on all sides of the war. But proponents will say that it contributed to a quicker ending to the World War than if area bombing had not taken place. So, this is the end of this offline mission. I hope you enjoyed watching me fly the Lancaster bomber. And I don't know how many of these I'll put up in the future, you know, kind of offline missions. In general, I'm more hesitant to put up Aces High videos, unfortunately, even though it's my favorite simulator currently. But the playback mode just isn't that great. But thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more videos, and see you next time.